What do you get when you mix Broadway, middle school drama, Disney Channel, a bars mitzvah, modern-day pop music, family-friendly humor, and auto-tune? You get a Disney Channel aesthetic-looking movie with your typical generic pop music mixed with forgettable jokes, characters, and some boring middle school drama that just so happens to be an adaptation from an original Broadway musical. That was a really long sentence. But you would have no idea it was from a Broadway musical because the story and characters are so wildly different from the original production. 13 the Musical could have been a charming comedy/drama coming-of-age movie musical, but instead it's a confusing blend of good intentions, really strange choices, and the typical decisions that are always made on modern-day movie musicals. It's fine, but not great. Let's talk about it. 13 the Musical is the Netflix adaptation of the 2008 Broadway show simply titled 13. Written by Jason Robert Brown, Dan Ilish, and Robert Horn, the original musical was widely known for being the only Broadway show made up of only teenagers in both the cast and band. No adults allowed. While it wasn't a popular show with only 105 performances and 22 previews, it did receive one Drama Desk Award nomination for Outstanding Lyrics, and won the hearts of many who saw the production. It was also adapted into a novel on the same year, and in 2022, the story was adapted into a movie musical, the one we are reviewing today. And I want to say that though this is based on a previous form of art, I want to focus on this film and treat it as a standalone movie. I will make some comparisons to the musical, but I will be doing a study on the differences between the movie and musical in an entirely different video, so make sure to watch out for that. 13 the Musical is fine. Like, there's nothing fantastic about it or truly terrible about it. It's just there. It's very bright and quite awkward and silly, and it's trying very hard to be a typical family-friendly Disney-fied show. I'll tell you what I liked and what I didn't like and what should have happened instead to this preteen story. If you haven't seen the movie, let me give you a summary of the story. Also, by the way, there will be spoilers. Not sure if that matters since it's 3 years old, but just in case, spoilers. So, the story follows a 12-year-old Jewish boy named Evan Goldman who lives in New York City. The number 12 and the mention of being Jewish is key here, as in Jewish culture, it is tradition for young boys to have a coming-of-age ceremony on their 13th birthday, called a bars mitzvah. This ceremony is meant to symbolize that the child has transitioned from boy to man. Evan is stressed about this, and it doesn't help that his parents got a divorce, and he is forced by his mom to move to a small town in Indiana. This is where the main story takes off, as Evan tries to navigate the world of middle school, with the mission to make friends so he can invite them to the most important party of his life. And of course, that is easier said than done, because it's middle school, full of tweens who have their own agendas and problems, like romance, jealousy, etc. If you think this is a stereotypical middle school coming-of-age story about friendship, forgiveness, and some singing and dancing in the mix, yeah, that's what this story is. There's nothing new or jaw-dropping about this story. But before we get into that, let's at least look at the positives of what I did like in this film adaptation. Let's be honest, kids in today's society do not act or even look like kids. I was genuinely worried that I was gonna be watching another kids movie where the kids act like 20-year-olds. So imagine my surprise that the kids in this film actually act like kids. And they even dress the kids up in appropriate modern attire. It was genuinely nice to see and something I appreciated. Now, this is definitely going to shock some people who know the original musical, because the friendship between Kendra and Lucy in the film makes no sense. And this will be a common theme throughout the rest of this review, because the storyline, the writers just changed so much of the storyline and characters that it's ridiculous. It's like they liked the basic idea of 13 and just took that basic idea and just ran with it, with the title name, characters' names, etc. And most of it I didn't like, but this friendship, I kind of did like how they wrote this dynamic. But it is very different. In the Broadway musical, Lucy is kind of a classic mean girl who only looks out for herself, while Kendra is the pretty and bubbly but oblivious popular girl who has no idea of Lucy's true intentions with her friendship. But in the movie, those characters are nowhere to be found. Lucy is a pretty nice girl with some insecurities who actually values her friendship with Kendra. And Kendra, while a kind girl who's still oblivious to her best friend's struggles, is someone who can be pretty self-centered and forget the feelings of those around her. And because of Kendra's actions, Lucy feels hurt and betrayed, which leads to a lot of the events we see in the film. Because of the character changes, the two actually make up at the end and have a happy ending. Again, fans would probably say this is not a positive in the slightest, but their friendship unfortunately was the most interesting dynamic in the film. For me, I cared way more about their storyline than anybody else's in the film. I almost wish that they were the main characters. Yes, their friendship does not exist in the original musical, but if the story has to change so much, I'm glad we got this. But that's one of the very few changes that I actually liked in this film, just so you're aware. And the other thing is, if there's one thing the movie got right, it was adapting some of the original stage lines to better fit the demographic. I'm not going into specific lines or songs. That's for another video. But the fact that they toned down or reworked some of the lines or lyrics that seem problematic or just plain cringy was a major plus for me. I just felt like that was a really good call to make. I have read some people's opinions on this movie, and there were quite a few people that didn't like the line changes or some of the songs being cut completely in the film, but I was personally happy about it because I honestly do not want to hear kids cussing, using words like slut or whore, or talking about drugs or suicide. I do not want that, and honestly, it's really inappropriate. Like, it really is. Now, I don't think that means cut out complete songs or cut out sections of songs or change the entire storyline completely just to avoid these certain words or concepts or conversations. But I am glad the adults in charge of this movie had some common sense. But speaking of changing the entire original storyline, that's where my likes of this movie end and my dislikes begin. Because unfortunately there's a lot, because they changed everything about the original story. Now, the reason why the storyline is so different from the original musical is because of how drastically different the characters are. And unfortunately, they are not better. In the musical, though all the characters are preteens, each child felt three-dimensional, with real insecurities, dreams, and feelings that myself, and I'm sure many others out there can relate to. But in the movie, the characters felt flat, underdeveloped, and watered-down tweens of what the original characters were. And don't worry, I will get to the adults. Evan, our main character, is a sweet, likable young tween who is just trying to make the best of things despite how chaotic everything feels, which is the same with the original Evan from the Broadway musical. However, that's about as far as this goes, because what the musical Evan has that movie Evan doesn't is a very big, important thing in this story. Flaws. You know, flaws that make a character mess up, have consequences, and forces them to go through this thing called character development, which in turn should make the story become more impactful and meaningful because they are the main character of this story? No? Okay, well, Evan, movie Evan, does not have flaws. Or at least I didn't see any. Sure, he's upset about his parents' divorce and being forced to move away from everything he knows. But that's normal. It's not wrong to feel controlled or angry over a situation like this. If this situation is what makes Evan flawed as a character, then golly, he's an angel. And also, Evan pretty quickly makes a lot of friends, like by the first day of school. And after a while, seems to be fine with the fact that he moved. And honestly, he handles his parents' issues really well. Like, he's a pretty mature young boy. And speaking of friends, we first meet Patrice. Now, Patrice is actually my favorite character in the original musical for a multitude of different reasons, so I was curious how they were going to handle her character. And, oh boy, Probably out of everyone, she was the most poorly rewritten character in this film. But for some reason, the writers wrote her to be this petty, controlling kid-turned-activist who never listens to anyone but herself. The amount of times Evan tries to make their friendship work and she turns him down is beyond baffling. Like, genuinely the most annoying character in the film. And that was so hard for me to take in. She felt like she should be the villain in this story because of how revenge driven she was. Like, she wanted Evan to feel bad because he left her? Just absolutely baffling. Speaking of villains, the actual main villains who are supposed to be villains in this story are apparently not villains in this adaptation. Brett took a complete 180 from his original counterpart. Super nice guy, instantly becoming friends with Evan, letting him hang around him and his group, and genuinely seems to really care for Kendra, not as a girl to be caught, but genuinely cares for her as a friend. Kendra, as I stated before, is a lot more blunt and combative than the previous Kendra, but she is still a super polite, kind young girl who has a crush on Brett. And Lucy, like Brett, had a major character upgrade. She is still kind of mean in the fact that she does blackmail Evan, but that is nothing compared to the Lucy in the musical. And again, she genuinely cares about her relationship with Kendra. Even though, yes, she does have a crush on Brett, that's not her main focus. Her main focus is her friendship with Kendra and feeling betrayed by her, and just not knowing how to deal with it. She is visibly insecure and genuinely just wants to connect with her best friend again. All of them seem like nice kids, just maybe a bit misguided sometimes. The role reversal that happened between Patrice, Brett, Kendra, and Lucy was jarring for someone who watched the musical. But even if you didn't watch the original musical, I still think the story is poorly written. Patrice is someone who was introduced to the audience to be Evan's new best friend. However, the second they literally get off the bus, Patrice shuts Evan down and berates him for wanting to hang out with the popular kids, when the popular kids are literally doing nothing. They dancing and chilling, Patrice. What's your beef with them? And that's the thing. We don't see why Patrice hates them. We don't see why the popular kids won't hang out with Patrice. Sure, they show that Patrice is an environmental activist and that some of the kids make fun of her for that, but come on. Really? We are suddenly supposed to feel bad for Patrice because she cares about the earth? Are you kidding me? I mean, that's fine that she cares about the earth. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't give her brownie points. That doesn't make her suddenly a good character. She's not just automatically a sympathetic character because she's an activist. And besides the whole activist thing, there's literally nothing else. That's it. There's nothing else to show that Patrice is right and the popular kids are wrong. And the fact that she constantly demeans, judges, and accuses Evan of every little thing he does or says in this movie is awful. Like, genuinely awful. I'm wondering if the writers were trying to make her sympathetic because, oh no, she doesn't have any friends because she's an activist. But it makes her come across more self-righteous and petty than anything else. And again, that really hurts because Patrice is awesome in the musical. And the writers show nothing to prove that Brett, Kendra, and Lucy are mean people. Right off the bat, they are shown to be a happy bunch who seem like a normal group of friends who immediately invite Evan into their group. Oh no. Heck, they are even nice to people like Archie, whereas in the musical, oh man. That is very different. Sure, Lucy does try to sabotage the movie date and tries to force Brett to date her, but the writers did show us her motivations of why she was doing what she was doing. Honestly, these are the nicest popular kids I have ever seen in a coming-of-age movie. But you know what? Now that I think about it, Patrice and Lucy are almost kind of the same, but they got very different writing treatment. It all depends on how the writers wrote their characters and how much screen time they got. Patrice didn't have a lot of screen time, so the audience don't really get a chance to know her motivations, and why she is the way she is. Whereas Lucy did get screen time, even her own song to explain her motivations. When Lucy is supposed to be the actual villain of the story, she just looks like a misunderstood character who just wants some love. And Patrice, who was supposed to be the sympathetic best friend, who is ignored and neglected by Evan, comes across as a big bully, a true mean girl. And Patrice isn't the only one who doesn't get enough screen time. Archie is also another neglected character in the story. He is barely in the movie with very little reason to be there besides being the token sick kid who wants to date Kendra. He's used more as a plot device than an actual three-dimensional character. And you know where all that screen time went? The mom. Evan's mom, Jessica, is given a whole entire subplot that revolves around this idea of moving on after divorce and how to handle that. Except she doesn't really handle it. Or we don't get to see it, because one minute she's bemoaning over her lack of cooking, and the next she is suddenly starting her own writing career. In the original story, the mom was not present in the musical, besides being mentioned or a few offstage dialogue moments, so the mom wasn't a main character in the slightest. However, regardless of whether or not you know that, this whole side plot feels so incredibly forced. This story is supposed to be a coming-of-age story for preteens, not a story of enlightenment for divorced mothers. This is Evan's story, not hers. And I just really cannot figure out why the writers thought this was a good idea. It dragged the pacing of the film, took away precious screen time for more important characters, and her character feels nowhere near emotionally satisfying. They even added a whole new song just for her and Evan, and it just didn't work at all. I felt like the writers were trying to make me feel sympathetic for her, but I just couldn't. There was no point for this mom side plot. Since I mentioned songs, let's move on to that, specifically with the singing. Since this is a musical, I would hope the music and the singing and the overall musicality of the movie would be good. And I mean, I guess. I know some people hated these new songs, and I will get into that, but just focusing on the singing, the dancing, and the songs from the original musical, everything was mostly okay. The movie definitely suffered from the same things that most modern movie musicals usually suffer from, which is some actors clearly have no singing ability, and the music itself feeling like it got an update to generic popland. Some of these kids can sing. The standouts definitely were Lucy, Brett, Kendra, and this kid. However, despite them sounding good, it didn't sound completely organic. And that sucks when this soundtrack was from a Broadway show where actual kids got up on stage and sang their hearts out night after night for over 100 shows. And for the kids who couldn't sing as well, it was pretty obvious. At least they could hold a tune, but it always makes me ask the question, why did you hire these kids for a movie musical? And when you combined all the actors singing to create harmonies, it is so jarring and loud. Sometimes it sounds like the team used pitch correction until they sounded like singing robots. It just all sounded so manufactured and pitchy. And on top of all of that, to make the original song sound more modern pop, made me a little sad. The original Broadway musical has a lot of rock elements that gave this vibe of youth, rebellion, fun, and adding pop just made this movie musical feel like another kid's movie musical. I understand pop is popular for young kids right now, and money does need to be made, but I think movies like Wicked prove that if you stick with the original material and are confident about the fact that the genre is musical theater, you will be rewarded for it. But I digress. These songs are fine, and the singing leaves much to be desired, but it's not terrible. It's definitely not the worst thing I've heard or seen. Now, on to the 3 brand new songs that Jason Robert Brown himself wrote for the new movie. I know some people hated them, especially when you compare them to the original cast recording. They are literally not on the same level. They're just very different from each other, and there's just no way to compare the two because they just feel like such different soundtracks. There's so much charm, wit, and personality to his old songs, with, again, the rock vibes giving off a rebellious teen feel, so the new songs can feel baffling and out of place. They feel like generic pop songs we've all heard a million times in the last few years that lack cleverness, depth, and that emotional punch you want to feel in a musical. Personally, I don't find them that terrible, at least with one of them. I've Been Waiting was my favorite out of the 3, as I thought it was sung well and was pretty groovy. But the Bloodmaster and It Would Be Funny were pretty forgettable. The Bloodmaster felt empty and lacked energy, and It Would Be Funny seemed like it was trying too hard to be deep, and it just didn't land for me. And that mom, why are you here? So yeah, the film had a lot of weak points, whether you know the original story or not. But just to add something positive here, the standout of this film for me was the actress that played Lucy. She did a fantastic job with her character, had the best voice in the cast, and overall was just a good actress. Lucy, the character herself, just had a lot more dimension and weight to her character than anyone else in the film. The character just feels genuine, and the actress looks like she's having a good time, especially during the song Opportunity. Honestly, that might have been the best song in the entire film for me. As someone who has watched the musical and listened to the cast recording, this doesn't feel like an adaptation at all. It feels like a complete different story, just with the same title name, character names, and has some of the songs mixed in. Genuinely, if I didn't know this was based off of a Broadway musical, I would think this was an original movie musical for kids. And not for tweens. I literally mean kids, like 9 and under. Ironically, for a movie that's supposed to be about tweens for tweens, it didn't feel that way at all, because the plot is not that deep. The acting is pretty goofy, the jokes are silly, the songs are easy to digest, and the overall visual of the movie is squeaky clean. This is not a film that I think 11, 12, or 13-year-olds would potentially watch or even look for. It's family friendly, but it doesn't have the emotional depth that I think preteens are wanting from a film for them and about them. And the film doesn't really tackle what it's like to be a 13-year-old. It doesn't talk about the transition from kid to teenager. There's nothing relatable about these characters, unlike the musical where it's all about making the tween experience feel relatable, whether you are currently 13 years old or an adult who is past that stage. It's really sad because I think 13, the Broadway show, is a great story to adapt into a film, but just not like this. I will go into more depth about this in another video. If there was a way to keep the original storyline from the Broadway show and leave out all the stuff like the movie did and just combine those two together, I think you could create a great preteen musical movie. Overall, 13 the musical is fine. It's kind of a mixed bag for me. It tries to modernize a cult Broadway show for a new audience, and while I do like some of the changes they made, the producers stumbled hard on the structure, the characters, and the music. There are so many things left out from the original musical that I will not get into right now, but if you have never seen the Broadway production, just know there was so much more they could have done and just didn't. The characters aren't compelling. The plot is one-dimensional, that's been told 1,000 times before, with super unnecessary side plots. The new songs are odd, and stop with the auto-tune. Gonna smack you in the head. No, I'm sorry, I don't want to smack you in the head, I'm sorry. I'm giving this movie a 5 out of 10 stars. It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's a kid movie musical with a lot of energy, but very little identity. That's kind of ironic, actually. If you're a die-hard fan of the original, this version might frustrate you. If you've never seen the stage version, you might find the movie charming, but probably forgettable. If you have little kids, they probably really like it. It's family friendly. And if you really want to watch a good coming-of-age story, I recommend you watch the original Broadway, or at least listen to the cast recording. Just watch out for the cuss words and other things in there. Sure, it might feel a bit outdated with the outfits, dialogue, and music, but it's much more emotionally gratifying than this movie could ever be. Let me know your thoughts. Did you love it, hate it, or somewhere in between? Did you like the new songs? Did the characters work for you? And what would you rate this movie musical out of 10 stars? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can follow along my journey discovering or rediscovering musicals. See you later!